It is a truth universally acknowledged that embroidery is the Hello YouTube, thanks for clicking on this video, and shout out to Big Daddy Algorithm for pimping it out to you. My name is Megan and welcome to my channel. I am a self-taught sewist and I recreate historical garments that I see in museums and portraits and fashion plates entirely by hand. Sometimes I even do modern garments too. Here on this channel we talk about fashion, fashion history, and occasionally I do the odd tutorials, so if that's your style and if you like to sew, or if you're just into fashion and clothes and textiles, then smash that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, do all of those YouTube things that will help out this wee channel of mine to grow bigger and reach more people so that we can get more content out to you guys. You know the drill. You know how it goes.
I know. I got it. I got the concept.
Today, I'm going to be talking about whitework embroidery. It's something that I've been rolling around with all summer. I've learned a lot about it, so I thought I would share that with you because I don't see much on the YouTubes about whitework embroidery and where it came from and what it is and why it's so freaking gorgeous. So I thought I would make my own video about it. Also because it's taken me forever to actually finish this gown because of said whitework embroidery. So I don't actually have any sewing content for you because I haven't gotten to the sewing part of the construction phase yet. I'm still embroidering the fabric, which I've been doing for the past 3 months. So it's been a thing. So I thought I would just do a video on how whitework embroidery is done and what it was used for historically, and show you some like pretty examples of whitework embroidery from the past that we can all just drool over together. So if that's your thing, stick around. I've got some dress porn for you guys. Whitework is exactly what it sounds like, white embroidery on white fabric. Besides just looking pretty, the embroidery adds texture and visual interest to what would otherwise be a very plain and simple garment or accessory. Whitework originated in India and China and became popular in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. At that time, it was mainly used to decorate household linens and altar cloths in churches, but by the 18th century it had made its way into fashion by way of accessories like aprons and fichus. Side note here to explain something about late 18th century fashion. In the 1780s, country living made its way into the cultural zeitgeist thanks to the works of Enlightenment philosophers like Rousseau, Diderot, and Voltaire, amongst others. There were lots. They argued that the rights of the individual were sacrosanct, that mankind was better off in a state of nature, and that civilization had a corrupting influence on humans.
If we assume man has been corrupted by an artificial civilization, what is the natural state?
Sound familiar? That's because modern Western democracies are largely based off of this Enlightenment philosophy. A lot of our values as a society come from this time, from the late 18th century, and it was really big when these guys wrote their magnum opuses. I'm a copywriter. I should know the plural of that word. Anyways, whatever. When they wrote their books, it was a really big thing, and their works were actually banned or censored by a lot of the aristocracy and the ruling class of Europe at the time because of their really radical content. Because essentially they argued that everyone had a right to happiness.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It was a whole capitalist development. I could go into this in a later video if you want. I'm not going to do that now because we are here to talk about whitework embroidery. So I'm not going to go into the whole philosophical, political, socioeconomic implications of Enlightenment philosophy. I can do that at a later time. If you want to hear about that stuff, hit me up. We can chat about it. But for now, let's stick to whitework embroidery. Anyway, what you need to know is that country living became a thing and it found its way into fashion, and people began to express this newfound love of nature in what they wore. So in the 1780s, everyone who wanted to be cool got really into this idea of a romanticized pastoral lifestyle. It was the OG cottagecore aesthetic, and it found its way into everything from theater to architecture to clothes. Marie Antoinette and her friends were particularly swept away by this trend, and she built herself a little rustic village on the grounds of Versailles where they would dress in white cotton gowns and frolic around in the fields pretending to be milkmaids. I will absolutely be exploring that in detail at some point because it was my favorite thing that happened in history like ever, and the entire reason that I even taught myself how to sew, but that's another story for another time. Whitework embroidery. So it became really trendy among rich upper-class women to wear little white embroidered aprons and caps and accessories as an expression of this country aesthetic. And yep, you guessed it, a lot of them featured whitework embroidery. Fichus were a really common accessory that was worn by almost everyone at this time. They were basically a giant handkerchief that you could wear around your neck and shoulders, tied and arranged in various ways to protect your skin from the sun because sunscreen didn't exist yet, and neither did treatment for skin cancer. If you were a working class person, your fichu would have been made out of linen or lightweight wool and would have been really colorful or even patterned. If you were rich and could afford to have white clothes that needed to be laundered, then yours would have been made out of a transparent silk gauze or a soft white cotton muslin embroidered with, yep, you got it, whitework. The two main types of whitework that we see on accessories from this period are open work, in which holes are drawn or cut in fabric and then overcast, and closed, which is worked flat on the fabric the same way as ordinary embroidery. By the early 1800s, whitework had made its way from accessories to clothing, and from 1805-ish and beyond, we see these absolutely stunning gowns made of floaty, transparent Dakar muslin with whitework designs all over them. I've been working on a recreation of one of these gowns all summer. So far in my historical costuming journey, I've focused on the 1780s and the early 1900s, so this is my first ever Regency build. So I'm going to be doing a video on that particular gown in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to go into more detail on Regency fashion when I do that video, so definitely stay tuned for that. Or, you know, just subscribe so that you don't even have to bother staying tuned, because if you subscribe, then YouTube will stay tuned for you. So there is that. So I decided to cover this gown that I'm working on in Whitework embroidery because otherwise it would have just been a plain and simple white gown, and I'm a maximalist to my core.
Am I extra or are you basic?
So I do not do plain or simple. Those are no words for me. We don't do that. Otherwise, this gown would have been super, super boring, in my opinion. So I needed to do something to jazz it up a little bit, which is why I decided to do this whitework. And B, because it's so freaking gorgeous. When I was researching this gown, I kept coming across these images of these beautiful whiteworked Regency dresses, and it just like stole my breath away. They were so gorgeous. So of course I had to have one for myself. So that's why I decided to torture myself for 3 months. It has been a process, and I've learned a lot about whitework. So I want to share a little bit of that with you guys. I'm working in my own design of wheat stalks and leaves done entirely in chain stitch and silk stitch. I drew out the design first on a piece of paper, and then to transfer it to my fabric, all I'm doing is pinning it underneath the fabric and then tracing over top of it with the heat erase pen. This isn't by any means a historically accurate method of doing this, but it's what I have to work with, so this is what I'm doing. It's easy to do because my fabric is so sheer, so I can see the lines of my drawing perfectly underneath it. To be honest, I have no idea how this would work on a more substantial fabric, but I'm not doing that right now, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so if you're a masochist like me and want to decorate your own clothes and accessories with whitework, and why would you not, like, look at the stuff, I'll show you the only 2 stitches that you really need to know. Basically, it's like painting with thread. First, we start with this lace weight cotton yarn in white, of course. I chose one that's just a shade darker than my fabric because I wanted it to be a little bit visible against the white petticoats and linen shift that I'll be wearing underneath. For the embroidery part of this project, I'm using a regular tapestry needle with a hole that's big enough to thread my yarn through without splitting or damaging it. We don't want to use regular embroidery floss for this project because the strands aren't twisted and they can split apart when you're working and end up looking really messy. Embroidery floss is great for projects where you want to blend different colors, but in this case we want the lines of the work to be clear and clean, and we want the back to be as neat and tidy as the front because the fabric is so sheer. The back of the work is every bit as much on display as the front when you're working with this kind of fabric, so you should make sure that you're weaving in the ends of the thread rather than knotting it, and that you're taking the extra time to start and stop your thread every time you move to a new part of the design. No lazy stitching allowed on this sheer cotton fabric. We're going to start off with the basic silk stitch, which is where you lay the threads next to each other to create a seamless, silky, hence the name, block of embroidery. This is pretty much the simplest embroidery stitch there is. It's literally just coming up one side of the work and then going down again on the other side of the work, and you just repeat the same motion over and over again until you've filled in the whole space. It ends up looking really pretty and seamless, and you get this gorgeous, silky, raised part of the work where you do this stitch. So in this design, I'm using silk stitch for the smaller leaves, and I'm using a chain stitch for the bigger leaves and to fill in stems and anything that is a line. Chain stitch is a little more complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's just as easy to do as a silk stitch. Basically, you just bring the needle up through the thread, then back down again right beside where you poked it through. This creates a small loop in the thread, which is your first link in the chain. Then you want to bring your needle up through the loop you just created, and back down again right beside it to create another loop. But instead of pulling your thread all the way down to lie flat on the fabric, come up again in front of the loop about a stitch length away and then pass your needle through the loop, pulling it forward to create another link in your chain. Then repeat again from the beginning until your chain starts to grow, and hey look, you're doing a chain stitch. Once it's all done, then we can press it with a hot iron to erase all of those blue marks, and voila, we have a finished design. Historically, this would have been done on a tambour frame with the fabric stretched out on the frame and the pattern pinned underneath it. And then the embroiderer would have just worked with the tambour hook and followed the lines of the pattern as she worked. And this way she wouldn't have had to mark up her fabric at all. But alas, my thin, floaty cotton voile is just a little bit too thin for my tambour frames, so I've had to work with a regular embroidery hoop, which has definitely drawn out the process a little bit longer than I would have liked, but that is okay. If this gown was actually being made in 1806 instead of 2022, there would have been several people working on the embroidery at once, meaning this whole entire gown would have maybe only taken 3 weeks to make instead of the 3 months that it's taken me all by my lonesome. So hopefully that made some amount of sense, and hopefully I've been able to inspire at least one of you to pick up an embroidery hoop or a tambour frame if you're fancy and try painting with thread yourself. This gown is still a work in progress. I still have to embroider the sleeves and the neckline and construct the whole thing. So I'm hoping to get that all done before it gets too cold outside to take nice pictures. There's like a wheat field sort of like at the other end of my street here, and I just have this vision of floating through the wheat field in this like beautiful embroidered gown that I made myself by hand. I can't do that, however, if there's snow on the ground, so let's hope that this doesn't take too much longer. When I get to the construction stage, I'm going to be filming a tutorial on how to sew a Regency gown, so if you're a Jane Austen or Bridgerton or Bodice Ripper fan, then definitely come back for that, because I will be showing you how to make your own gorgeous Regency gown that you can scold Mr. Darcy in.
The mode of your declaration merely spared me any concern I might have felt in refusing you had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner.
I've also had some requests for a video on hand stitching techniques and different stitches that I use in my construction process. So if that's something you're interested in, then definitely stay tuned, because I'll be doing that soon. I don't know when, maybe before the Regency gown, maybe after. It depends on how long this takes me. So YouTube will notify you. Once again, subscribe. I think I've said that like 3 times in my video, but guys, I am a baby channel and I need all the support I can get. So I love you. Thank you for watching this. And I have to go and finish torturing myself with this gown. Toodaloo. So hopefully that made some amount of sense, and hopefully I've inspired, I hope I haven't inspired you to do this. This is not fun, guys. So hopefully that made some amount of sense, and hopefully I've been able to inspire at least one of you to pick up an embroidery no hoop. Hello YouTube, thanks for clicking on this video, and shout out to Big Daddy Algorithm for pimping it out to you.